competence breeds confidence, right?
Right.
And I think when you've been at it for such a long time, and the funny thing about the industry, I'll say, sort of in parting, is a lot of people will kill you with silence, right? Like the actor in L.A. or the musician in Nashville or Chicago. It's like it's not that people are like, kid, you don't have any talent. You're not like right for this biz. It's not going to happen for you. Get out of my face. Like that doesn't happen anymore. It's just kind of quiet. And so the question is, what do you do with that quiet? What do you do with that silence? And then it forces you to go back and look at your music.
My guest is Nashville-based singer-songwriter Phillip-Michael Scales. He's performing in Myron's at the Smith Center Friday, February 27th at 7 p.m. And Phillip-Michael has built his career brick by brick from grinding through 308 gigs in Chicago to touring Europe, playing national radio and opening for Keb Mo and Caravan Palace. And now with his new album, Good to Be Here, produced by Grammy-nominated Dan Knobler, Phillip delivers a modern take on Stax era soul filled with grit, heart, and hard-earned hope. This is the story of an artist who didn't wait for a break, he created one. And for ticket information, go to thesmithcenter.com. For everything about Phillip-Michael, go to phillipmichaelscales.com, and you can follow him on Instagram and YouTube. And Phil, I'm going to call you Philip rather than Phillip-Michael because it'll get too confusing if I do the hyphen in between.
Sure.
Welcome to the show. Thanks.
You.
Where did you learn to really develop that work ethic as a musician and as a singer?
I think I'm just impatient in general. I think when I was a kid, I remember, I had some gear at Guitar Center that I wanted to get, and my dad would always be like, "All right, I'll go halves on it with you." And, so then I was just like, "All right, what odd jobs can I hustle my family members into to be like, okay, let me mow the grass, let me do this, let me do this, let me do this, to kind of get what I want." So I think a lot of it was born out of impatience. And, yeah, I don't know. Both my parents are scientists. My mom's a veterinarian, my dad's a dentist. And as a result, I think that like there's also a part of me that's like methodical in that way, So I think it was just kind of a step by step by step, and so it's like a if this then that, and what needs to happen in order for this. So I think it kind of just translated for me.
Yeah, it's a good discipline to have. Not everybody has that, especially artists, for
For
whatever
sure.
reason. I think it's because the creative impulse is at war with the discipline impulse in terms of
Definitely.
what we'll say it's the grind. And you moved to Nashville, which we'll touch about in a second, but I just want to mention your other album, Sinner-Songwriter. That was the first one.
Yeah.
And when you decided to start with this new album, was there a thought in your head about you wanted to take a different approach, continue what you had started, or what? I'll shut up and let you answer because I'm not the guy.
I think that when I was making Sinner-Songwriter, it was like more of a blues focused, and I was still sort of finding my sound. And then I had a random single called "Find a Way" that grooved a little bit more, and I got a chance to play that on the Ellen DeGeneres show, which was great. And so I think that as a result, I like that bounce. I like that soul. I like that sort of vibe. So I think when I went for a record two, I was like, I think I want to incorporate more of
Mhm.
that bounce and more of that soul.
And what made you decide to go to Nashville? It's an interesting location. I know that there's a lot of obviously country artists that perform there, but still, Nashville's an interesting town.
Nashville's a good industry town, and it's a big songwriting town. A lot of people, it's known for country and it's been known for country, but there's so many artists who live here, everyone from like Paramore to Brittany Howard, Alabama Shakes. Like so many people are just here. There's so many recording studios. There's so many musicians. There's so many producers. So just to be around here, I'm in a writing session right now.
Mm.
With two producers, and so it's one of those things where it's just more accessible. You go to let's say you lived in I don't know Omaha, Nebraska. They're like, okay, who plays bass? And they're just like, oh, this guy does. And then here you're like, who plays bass? And you're just like, oh, what kind of music is it?
Everybody.
Yeah, well, they're like, what kind of music is it? And you're like, oh, it's a soul thing. You're like, oh, is it Stax or is it Motown? Because those are going to be two different phone calls.
Right.
Like that's how
Exactly.
granular you can get in Nashville.
Well, Stax was way before your time. So how did you know about Stax or get the feeling of Stax?
Well, I think that I grew up in Metro Detroit, so my parents were always going to, Motown, and Motown was just kind of in the blood. So I feel like they were kind of sister company or, sister record companies in a way, and
Right.
I always loved Otis Redding.
Sitting by the dock of the bay.
Indeed.
Yeah. In fact, have you thought about for your third album? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but because you've got the talent for it, just really a nod to some of these older musicians and older hits in that genre.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that like there's an originality that I really love about some stuff. And I think that for me, I feel like the music, how do I put this? When you're, I respect the old and I love the feeling of the old, but I think bringing something new to it is sort of the artist's desire, right? Because otherwise you're just kind of like replicating something else. Like Amy Winehouse came out and she made an incredible record that was like a soul record, but it also kind of felt a little hip hoppy, and the lyrics were so painfully her and almost modern that it harkened back to it. But after that, you had a whole bunch of like people who were just sort of going to the Motown Museum, buying the magnetic poetry set, and being like, "Baby, baby, baby, it's been a long time. I miss your tender, sweet loving." Like, and it's just
Right.
like, I don't know. Sam Cooke well. Otis Redding did Otis Redding well.
Yeah. And then also too, you could bring your own interpretation and your own modern angle to some of these older tunes too.
Definitely.
Especially since you have that pedigree and you have that background as well. Are your folks very supportive of your artistic decisions, or not really your artistic decisions, but your artistic career? That might be a better way to phrase it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to keep them from coming to shows. That's how supportive they
Oh,
are.
excellent. No,
Yeah,
no.
for sure.
Because usually parents who have steady jobs and professions, if their kid wants to do something that's in the creative field, acting, singing, dancing,
Sure,
whatever it
sure.
is, they say, well, maybe you want to also learn to do something on the side just to have steady income type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I have two really supportive parents, and they've done nothing but push me. And like, there have been times when I'm like, I don't know about all this, and then they're just like, nope, you got to stay in this. I think that they love it, and I'm lucky enough that I have a skill of singing and playing guitar, and so I can fill things in when I need to with, performing, just covers and backgrounds and things of that nature as well. So that's almost like what I consider like my steady job.
Sure. I have to one more thing with Nashville, and then we'll move on because I want to talk to you about your upcoming appearance in a moment at the Smith Center. But did you get a chance ever to go over to the Grand Ole Opry since you're in Nashville?
I have not been to the Opry yet. I need to go. I've had a
Yes.
couple friends play, but I haven't been to the Opry. Funny story was I was in a musical show in maybe middle school. It was like a mall. There's a mall in Dearborn, Michigan that I would perform in, and it was actually by the company, the Grand Ole Opry. Like the Grand Ole Opry would send the show out, and it was a Christmas show that was like 15 minutes that would be performed when kids were waiting to see Santa.
Ah, so it's
So
almost like a road show in a sense.
yeah, essentially. But they would like set up camp from like pretty much like Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve. And I never like I just that's like the first I ever heard of the Grand Ole Opry was it was just on my check as a child actor.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, when you start and you tour all the time now, as well as being based in Nashville, when you're coming to Las Vegas, again, that's February 27th, it's at 7 p.m. at Myron's at the Smith Center. Have you thought through what you're going to present? Is it different than some of your other venues and cities when you perform when you're touring?
No, I think me and the guys are flying out there, and we're gonna kind of give the set that we typically give. I may throw in a couple extra. I'm always a little offbeat sometimes. Sometimes I'll throw in a curveball to my band or whatever. But yeah, we're still promoting "Good to Be Here." We're still promoting the rest of the catalog, and I think a lot of it is about telling the story and letting people get to know who I am as an artist.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But when because you're writing original songs, is it more of a challenge by not including certain songs that everybody knows and mixing it in with your original stuff?
I don't know if it's a challenge. I mean, I every now and then you throw in a cover, but like, there's other people who do covers better than, maybe better than I do or whatever,
Right.
And plus too, I think it's kind of it feels a little weird sometimes, right? You go and you cover a bigger song and then people are like that's a time-tested Grammy-winning song, and then people, oh yeah, well I like I like that cover you did. So it's like you don't want to. I'd rather weed out all the people who are there for the covers than to who want to hear the original
Right.
or then and play for the people who want to hear original music. Because at a point in time, like "Don't Stop Believing" was an original song. you know.
Correct, correct. Well, do you think though, in a way, and it's a philosophical question, do you think, and it doesn't necessarily mean you particularly, but does it diminish an artist in a sense that if they are doing a song that's well known and they're doing a cover of it, that because it's not their original material, it looks like they're not cheating, but I'm trying to think of the word. Our audience will know it's pollen time, so my brain is not functioning the way it normally does. So I usually can come up with this quicker in my head. But in other
Yeah,
words, when you're covering a song versus original material, does it diminish the artist, especially performing live, in the sense of the audience? The audience is happy to hear a cover song, but at the same time, it takes away from the artist's unique talents and abilities.
I think the best way to do that is to pull something very left field, right? Like, I think that if you're going to do a cover, do something that's unexpected or do it in a way that's sort of original to you, you know,
That makes
and
sense.
sort of your vibe. I think that, if you're going to, if you're a 60s retro style band and then you cover a Beatles song, then not the coolest thing. But, when Stevie Wonder plays, We Can Work It Out, you're like, whoa, this is like,
Right.
a new arrangement and like the vibe is there. And so you're kind of adding something. So I guess maybe that's the thing is like, if you're not going to add something, then maybe it's not worth it, but if it's a better, if you don't want it to be a better version of what you're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think they want to see you, and by singing and playing something that's well known, to me, it takes away from the artists themselves
It
because,
can. I think it
yeah,
can, for
yeah.
sure.
Do you find that because and you mentioned that you're in between writing sessions, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Do you find that given technology where it is today, you don't necessarily have to be based in Nashville? You explained why earlier, but you could theoretically record almost anywhere, and you can get tracks from anywhere and put it all together anywhere. But
You
but do you think that,
can.
yeah, but do you think that being in Nashville itself, there's something in the bloodstream there that keeps that creativity going?
I think there is. I think there is because you run into somebody or you go to a show or your buddy. Like there's a lot of I've had a lot more writing sessions in Nashville. I actually started writing in Nashville with other people, and I think that like there's a little bit of like uh it just gets you out of your zone, the way one person might approach something versus the way somebody else might approach something versus
Right.
some like it's all a very different thing. And so I think that like yes you can, and during the pandemic a lot of Sinner-Songwriter was a lot of people flying tracks to me from different places,
Right.
but I think that for the most part there's definite value in sort of not being an island and not being stuck in your own sort of way.
Well, with Good to Be Here, was that all recorded in Nashville?
Sure was. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a
good.
live record, and the coolest thing about that was it was a living, breathing thing. So you could track the band and you could hear the band, around. It was cool.
Do you think that that Nashville base just puts a certain imprint on you as an artist? That, in other words, when you're Nashville based, you're either Nashville, New York, LA, perhaps Chicago, Detroit,
Yeah.
that type of thing. So do you find that you become totally identified with Nashville?
I don't know. Maybe I think maybe people like use it as a marketing thing when like, oh, a Nashville band's coming here, and people are like, oh, Nashville equals music equals good. But I mean, it's sort of a similar thing, right? Like if you're like, oh, this is a New York actor, it's like, okay, like they're a New York actor. There's a lot of actors in New York, and there's a lot of musicians in Nashville.
Yeah, it makes sense. One thing I like to do with my guests is because you mentioned your band, if you want to give them a shout out in terms of who's on what.
Yeah, I got Alfonso Jones on the drums, and then I've got Matt Sherman on the bass, and then I've got my buddy Garrett Wade on guitar.
Good. Is this your first time in Las Vegas?
No, I played the House of Blues with Jerry Cantrell in like 2022, I believe.
Okay, so your second time here. Well,
Second time.
you'll like Myron's. It's a great venue in terms of they just redid the stage too, but the audio
Oh, great.
quality and the visual quality is outstanding.
Terrific.
Yeah, and it's only one part of it. When you were getting back to your writing, I wanted to just follow up on something too. When you're sitting down and writing this album, the current one, Good to Be Here, did you have a theme in mind, or was it more a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I'll put it all together, and this will represent me, but it's not necessarily all songs connected.
I think there are different facets of my personality. I think that I typically tend to write a bit more uh soulful personal songs, and so I think it's like kind of about my journey and where I'm going and where I'm headed, and I think that Good to Be Here in specific was a song about being in the music, like, no man's an island, but it's hard to believe. And so it's like, I got a ways to go, but I ain't got to go it alone, And so having other people with me and having other people help me has been really helpful. So I think, yeah, I think that there were, there's like, Leaning on the Altar, which is one of my songs. And that one's kind of about being disillusioned about having mentors, being like, I did all the right things and you still don't care. And I'm just trying to find my place in the world. Or a song called Let You Down, which is about, not feeling like I'm where I need to be or I want to be just yet, and that worry or fear that you're letting somebody down. So there's just different aspects of that. So I don't know. I think that like the continuity kind of comes from my life.
Do you think it's also because you're relatively young that it's hard to write about your personal journey because you think of it as once you've gone a certain amount of things that you've done, and now you're an older, wiser kind of guy. Where in your case, you know, you're younger, so your journey is going to be less complete than an older
I mean, I
person.
think
If
we
that
all
makes
have our
sense.
journeys, and like, I think that like, when you think about teenagers writing music, it may not resonate, or you may get patted on the head by an older person, but to them, whatever happened in high school or at prom or whatever that was, or we had one great night at prom, and then, it's like I don't exist anymore. It's like that feeling's gonna resonate with
Mhm.
other kids that age,
Yeah,
and
good point. Yeah.
I think that's yeah, I think it's almost like if you try to go too wise and you try to like be too mindful, then everyone's like, okay, I don't need a history lesson, or I don't need a life lesson, I don't need a lecture,
Right. You mentioned earlier about your disappointment with mentors. Was there a major disappointment, or was it just a series of people who you thought could help you learn, develop, grow, and it just didn't work out? Or is it just more of a philosophical
I think
analysis?
that for me, there was just a series. I think in the music business, since it changed a lot, I kind of happened to be of a specific age where, my career would have looked completely different had I been born in 1970, right? Like in terms of if I were, 20 years old in the 90s, and I maybe would have moved to LA or moved to Nashville or like whatever and really grinded it out. And there's trade-offs, right? There's the idea that like I would have had to catch the eye of someone who, could do something, and I might have to relocate to do that or whatever. But then nowadays, there's also the idea that I can build something online and really hone in and like, grow that. And so I think that like with the changes in the music industry, I promise that I'm coming to a point. Um,
You're fine. We have the time.
you end up in a situation where people have a lot of opinions because there's so many ways to proverbially skin the cat
Right.
that people are like, oh, you need to do this, oh, you need to do that. And like I said, my parents were both doctors, which means they both went to school, which means that like they studied the information, they put it into practice, and they got grades on the test, right? Like if you know the information, you did the thing. And I think in music, it's like you look for this mentor to help you be like, hey, okay, what should I do, what does it look like, or what is this, like, what's the thing? And then you realize like, oh, I did everything you told me to, and I came back and you're like, oh, and you're like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, and it's like, so
Yeah.
I think that like the deal with mentorship, and I'm sure it has to do with the internet and it has to do with all these other things, is that we live in a society now where I think mentorship takes investment, right? Like it's not just giving advice. And now because we all have Facebook, we all have Instagram, we all have all these channels to give people our opinions, we don't have to do the follow-up work to have the investment, right? So
Mhm.
it's like if you, let's say you're a coach, and you're like, coach, I don't know what to do in this situation, blah 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 blah. You tell them, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then by the end of the season, you're like, I am so proud of you. I've gotten in, I got after you a couple times, but your shooting went from this to this. And you see what I'm saying? There's like an investment there. So when that coach is like, I am so proud of you for how far you've gone, there's really investment there versus some cat in the music industry being like, oh, you should do this, 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 and this. And then you come back and you're like, hey, I did this. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You
And so
know?
there's also a one-on-one aspect. The coach, for example, is working with you physically,
Right.
and both of you are sharing the same space. Whereas a lot of mentoring you might get might be, again, online or
Sure.
on Zoom or on the phone with someone who's suggesting things to you. And it's not the same that way as well.
Yeah, there's a proximity to the relationship, but I mean, I think a lot of the ones I was talking about were kind of in-person
Okay.
situations. But I think the other thing too is that the music industry changed with MySpace in that now all of a sudden I can say this song got more plays than this song. Therefore, this song is a worse song than this song, right? Which isn't true,
No, it's
right?
not.
Because then somebody can just go to the student library and put their song on repeat on all the computers and then build their song that way. And then the industry goes, oh, well, okay, well, this song's better than this song because of this. And it's like now we've gotten so skewed where we're listening with our eyes first, right? We're oh well, this did better, so this must be better. And it's like so few people are trusting their taste these days that there's just so many musicians from so many different aspects. And so like the only rational way to filter a lot of this music out and not go crazy is, okay, well, how well are these numbers doing and how well is this sort of going? So like becoming invested into someone is a very different thing.
And also, too, don't you think, Philip, that when you are looking at numbers, they may not reflect the quality of the song, for example, and they may not reflect your artistic choices. So you have to be able to have a tough enough skin to withstand that happening, where all of a sudden a particular song of yours doesn't do as well as another song.
For
But
sure.
you know that the song is good because you wrote it, you performed it, and so it's there. But you have to have a toughness about you as an artist that not everybody can do.
Yeah, I think you do have to have like that frame of reference. And I think that, for me, I want to say Ira Glass, This American Life was saying that, when you start out, your talent is here, your taste is here, and your talent is here. Right. And so I think that the guiding principle for myself is how do we just make something better than it was last time? How do we close that gap between my taste and my talent? And I think that over the years, that's kind of what I've been doing. I can say that Good to Be Here is better than Sinner-Songwriter. I can say that, Sinner-Songwriter, the LP is better than the EP. I can tell, and so it's like as you sort of progress, and I think, we get into the hard part now where it's like, okay, well, the difference between an NBA player who rides the bench and an NBA player and LeBron James is not very high. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they're both very capable. They're both in the NBA, but it's like what I'll say it this way. There's probably 10,000 people in this country who could make me a better basketball player, right? There's probably 5 people on the planet who could make LeBron James a better basketball player. And 3 of them are Tibetan monks. You know what I'm saying? So
It's
it's
a
like
religious experience, yes.
exactly. So I think it's like, the crazy thing about Nashville, the crazy thing about getting here is just that like it's all margin work, to the layman person. They're like that sounds great and that sounds great and that sounds great and that sounds great. So it's like once you start deciding what blows up or what goes to radio or whatever, like that becomes a very, trickier process.
You make a very good point. You're working on the margins in a sense that because all of your songs would have a certain level, but you want one particularly, you may want one to particularly jump ahead of the others
For
and
sure.
hit radio or just become very well known compared to the other ones. Yeah, that's
Sure.
always a trick. And today the marketplace is so different than it used to be. As you mentioned in the 70s and
Mhm.
60s and even into the 80s and 90s, it's a whole other world. But you seem to have a very clear concept of where you want to go. You seem to be able to you also have a confidence about you that, I mean, to my eyes, that you put out 2 albums, you're going to obviously do more. And again, you're coming to the Myron's at the Smith Center February 27th, but you are maybe this is the term self-assured. Now you may be hiding the insecurity behind the self-assured, but that's what I take from our
I
conversations.
appreciate that. But I think competence breeds confidence, right?
Right.
And I think when you've been at it for such a long time, and the funny thing about the industry, I'll say, sort of in parting, is, a lot of people will kill you with silence, right? Like the actor in LA or the musician in, Nashville or Chicago. It's like it's not that people are like, kid, you don't have any talent. You're not like right for this biz. It's not going to happen for you. Get out of my face. Like that doesn't happen anymore. It's just kind of quiet. And so the question is, what do you do with that quiet? What do you do with that silence? And then it forces you to go back and look at your music and say, okay, let me listen to like an analog musician, right? Who's an analog to this? Maybe it's Gary Clark Jr. Maybe it's Michael Kiwanuka. Maybe it's Leon Bridges. Okay, well, okay? Well, our lyrics seem like kind of on the same par. Okay, well, our voices. Oh, well, maybe I need to work on my voice, or maybe I need to work on the production, or maybe okay, well, what is it about this? And so it's like the more you can sort of. I've just been doing that for decades now. Of just
There's
like
that grinding that I talked about in the beginning.
there you go to bring it full circle. So I think
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
how do you refine yourself, right? How do
Right.
you continue to do that? And then once you've done that and you see, oh, I made my production better, or I found a better producer, or I found a better this, and you see that people's reaction is now, wow, that song's really good. And it's like, you're a stranger from the internet and you love this song. And then you do something else, and then more people are like, oh, I really like that. And you're just like, oh, wow, these people really care about my music. People are starting to respond now, and that keeps you going. And
Yeah.
that kind of gives you a level of self assurance.
Before I let you go, what do you want people to take away from knowing about you, Phillip-Michael Scales, either as an artist or in your upcoming performance at the Smith Center?
I
What do you
want them
want
to
people to
come
take away?
away from the performance with a T-shirt and a record, and I want people to believe in themselves. I want people to use me as an example to keep going. Like find your way, get it done. There's always a way. If you really want to do it, there's always going to be a way to do it, and it may look different than you thought it would, and it may look a couple different ways, but you're gonna get where you're going. Just keep at it.
Well, that's a great way to leave it. My guest has been Phillip-Michael Scales. He's performing in Myron's at the Smith Center Friday, February 27th at 7 p.m. And for ticket information, go to thesmithcenter.com. And for everything about Phillip-Michael, go to phillipmichaelscales.com. And yes, you can get t-shirts there too as well. And follow him on Instagram and YouTube. And Phillip-Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.